All right, and we are here on another episode here of Commanders in the Chat, a Washington Commanders and a DC Defenders centric podcast hosted by your boy Couch Coach, and we are here on a glorious Easter Sunday as we're recording this episode. We'll have a brief episode for you guys today. We'll dive into more of the offensive prospects that I feel as though that the Washington Commanders should select with the seventh overall pick in this year's NFL draft, which is crazy to think that it's literally 2 weeks away from the NFL draft. We'll kind of somewhat have a series in the next couple of weeks where we'll talk about the offensive prospects and then the defensive prospects. Then I'll give you my complete mock draft the week before the NFL draft. So we'll have that going. And also, we'll continue discussing DC Defenders as the DC Defenders season is underway here. So let's dive into the $1 million question that many people have asked since the Commanders got word that they were going to have the seventh overall pick in the NFL draft. So without further ado, here's my thought process. And with the seventh pick in the 2026 NFL draft, the Washington Commanders select, which we'll hear that probably about 9 o'clock on April 23rd, because we know how the first round really like drags and it drags and it drags. So I'm going to go first, and I have it into tiers. So the first one is going to be like the long shot, the guy, the prospect that I hope that is there, but probably more than likely won't. And then also I have two guys that are probably much going to be that are going to fall into our lap if the Commanders decide to keep the seventh overall pick. So the first one, obviously, I think if you know who is a long shot at this point. If you don't, if you don't, I have nothing for you. But the long shot is going to be Jeremiah Love. Obviously, let's go into like the intangibles of what he can do. Obviously, he would be, the downhill back. Back in the day, he would be considered like that factor back, the bell cow running back in a sense where he can carry that load. That type of running back. Obviously, very good as a pass catcher as well too in the backfield. So there will be such a dynamic offense that you would have, especially on the run. In the run game, obviously with Rashad White there, also Bill, aka Ja'Cory Cross-Merritt. Let's just imagine those three in there as well. So kind of, he can, you got Rashad and also Bill can kind of pitch hit while Jeremiah Love gets a little breather here and there, but he can make that offense dynamic. I definitely would love for him to fall into our laps at 7, but more than likely it won't. My biggest hope and my biggest concern is that he goes forward to Tennessee, because if Tennessee doesn't get him at 4, I know the New York Giants probably more than likely would select Jeremiah Love, which as a Commanders guy, I would not want to see Jeremiah Love twice a year playing for the New York Giants, especially. And I know how you look at Harbaugh, what he's going to do there with the New York Giants, and having a back like him. Something that I really, really, really want to avoid, if he becomes a Giant, and something I do not want to see twice a year as an opponent. So I know he's probably not more likely won't be at 7. It's a possibility because things could change. Things could change even in this 2-week period. Obviously, everything is, pretty much the haze in the barn when it comes to the process, to the combine and also pro days and what have you. So it's just one of those where more than likely Jeremiah Love would probably be the 4th overall pick going to Tennessee, or not even dropping. Even if he drops at 4, I think the Giants will probably scoop him up at 5. So this is my king of wishful thinking, that Jeremiah Love could still potentially be at number 7 for the Washington Commanders, which more than likely won't. But you can always wish, And it could happen. I mean, it's not 100% chance that this happened, but it's probably about a good 95, 96% chance that Jeremiah Love won't be at 7 with the Washington Commanders. So, I look at it from that. So, moving forward, we got to talk about actually some guys that I think potentially will fall to our lap at number 7. And probably be Carnell Tate. You look at Carnell Tate, 6'3", 195 pounds. Obviously, a big target, makes contested catches, got great hands. And I think he will fit in that mold of kind of what the Commanders need, because the Commanders really need that wide receiver too. I think ever since the whole Jahan Dotson situation, they've been kind of looking at that, and this could be the potential long-term wide receiver number 2. You look at kind of what he's done at Ohio State. Just the fact that he was like that number 2 wide receiver alongside like Marvin Harrison Jr. Once upon a time, and then also I think he was there with JSN. But we all know that that Ohio State breeds wide receivers like crazy. So I definitely think he is somebody that can fit in that mode. Last year he had 51 receptions for 875 yards. So it's kind of one of those where I think he could fit that mold, but it's going to be really tricky at 7 to get a guy that probably will be your wide receiver 2, even for the long term. I know a lot of people look at him as someone that he may not break out the shadows, but they said the same thing for Terry McLaurin. When he came in, obviously he wasn't a first round pick, but the fact that, coming in, he was really supposed to be the special teams guy, and then he's morphed into a wide receiver 1, which Carnell Tate may fit in that mode as well. You can never say never when it comes to that situation. So I'm at 7 is kind of one of the things where I think you want a sure thing. So it's going to be interesting how that dynamic seems. And I know from the offense standpoint, I know the needs essentially you need a running back, and also need some receivers to kind of for that. So he'll be someone I think at 7 that will fall into our laps. Another one is going to be Jordyn Tyson, 6'1", 195-pound wide receiver out of Arizona State. If you recall, he didn't have a good season this year. He obviously was marred by injury. He had 8 touchdowns this season, and he had 61 catches and 711 yards. He was dealing with a hamstring injury for the bulk of the season. But if you remember the previous season, where Arizona State went to the college football playoff, obviously with our guy Cam Scatterboo, who we'll see a lot in his career if he stays valiant. And that's great year. And that was in 2024. He had 75 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 10 touchdowns in that season. We played pretty much a full season. Thing I like about Jordyn Tyson, great route running abilities, great for yards after catch. He does things effectively, so he can have that big play ability after the catch. So that's something where you look at that kind of, I want to say not that jumps off the screen. I put it that way. So you look at that, and then I think the good thing about him is also he has the ability to kind of create mismatches, and also very physical when it comes to the cornerback. So I look at those intangibles as well too, where he can also emerge down the line as a wide receiver 1, but definitely I think he would be a great second option to Terry. And even with that wide receiver room as well, I think he just adds more beef paws to the actual room. Where you look at this, I like Treylon Burks. I definitely think he's emerging. Definitely that amazing one-handed catch on Sunday Night Football against the Broncos, and even kind of the production he had at Tennessee. And now, hopefully now being in this offense for the second year in a row, well, being here for full season. So I definitely think he has potential there. Bringing back Yami Brown. And then also, Luke Caffrey. So you look at the wide receiver room is still a great room, but still it's like no one in that number 2 slot is kind of one thing. It's almost like back committed. But, if you have two bookends on the outside in Terry and also either, Carnell Tate or Jordyn Tyson, I definitely think that will be something that adds some dynamic to this offense for the Washington Commanders in 2026. So it's kind of one of those things where those are the kind of guys I think will probably fit into our lap. And the thing about it's going to be interesting because, we're going to talk about the defense next week, but there's a lot of prospects defensively that I think will definitely have a great impact on this team. So keeping it offense, these could be some valuable options. Definitely, if Jeremiah Love is at 7, just look at it as divine intervention. If Jeremiah Love falls out of lap at 7, but let's just keep it. Let's just keep it honest. He's not going to be there at 7. But those are good prospects that I see that the Washington Commanders could potentially draft 2 weeks from Thursday. Like I said, we'll dive into the defensive prospects. Someone to give you somewhat of a tease. And especially, I don't know, for some odd reason, I wanted to lead off with the Carnell Tate because, obviously the Commanders have been everywhere as far as pro days. But I don't know, for some odd reason, I had a interesting feeling about when the Commanders went to Ohio State. So I look at like Carnell Tate and the kind of the tease we'll talk about next week. Some guys that jump off I'll go more into detail next week as far as these guys. I mean, you look at, like I talk about Sonny Styles, the linebacker from Ohio State. So another OSU guy. Ruben Payne Jr. from Miami, I think was there. David Bell. I think David Bell has been on everybody's radar since the beginning. I know, shout out to RG3. I know he talked about David Bailey in December as far as somebody who the Commanders could take, especially someone off that edge. So we'll talk about him. Also, Caleb Downs, who is another Ohio State prospect, where it's kind of one of those where I can see a Buckeye being in the equation, either offensively or defensively. But we'll definitely dive into those prospects next week. And yeah, I got a strange feeling. If I had to put money on it, I definitely think an Ohio State Buckeye will have their name called with that 7th overall pick in the NFL draft going to the Washington Commanders. So enough of the draft talk. We definitely got to talk about the DC Defenders, which obviously the defending UFL champions. They won by the final score of 44-26 over the Columbus Aviators. This is kind of one of those games where obviously you looked at the loss in week 1 to St. Louis, where there was a lot of miscues in that game, where you looked at it where the defenders had a great opportunity to win this game, but that game against St. Louis in week 1, but they failed to capitalize on a few things. So back to the drawing board, and now, going on the road on Friday night and beating the Columbus Aviators in their home debut. So great effort by the defenders. The keys that stood out, obviously, no punts. This was a game where essentially no punts. They started their first 4 drives, and they scored on their first 4 drives. You just look at just kind of the offensive onslaught in the second and the third quarter, where they scored 17 points in the second quarter and then 14 in the third quarter. Essentially 31 points in that 2 quarter span, and pretty much come away with the victory. Yet again, just like last year, the run game is very pivotal. Obviously, Deion Jackson, a great game. He had 3 touchdowns. He had 97 yards on 11 carries. Very efficient day on the ground. Also, Deion Jackson scored that first opening drive for the DC Defenders and pretty much got the ball rolling for this DC Defenders team. Offensively wise, had 319 and 229 of them was on the air. So basically, yet again, another game where the run game was low. And that's one thing where you looked at a lot of games last year with the defenders where that run game was very effective, and they won those games as well when they control that stat line. So great win for them on the road. Next week, good challenge. They'll be back at home. They'll be playing Houston Gamblers. So definitely gonna be a great game next Saturday at Audi Field on Saturday afternoon. Definitely a few call outs in this game, definitely defensively. Sam Kidd did his thing. He had 8 tackles, solo tackles, and also 1 interception. Then also Gabe Taylor. We all know Gabe Taylor is the brother of the late Sean Taylor. I've had 5 tackles. 5 of them was all solo, and 1 interception on the game on Friday. And yet again, now that the defenders are 1-1 in the season, they get ready to head back home. Face Houston on Saturday. So, very pivotal game. You didn't want to go home being starting the season 0-2 and coming to home at 0-2. So just one of those things. It was a must-win, a back against the wall type of game. Where I think you look at how the defenders were last year as well too, where they go to the occasion when the backs was against the wall. So definitely something to look forward to in this matchup coming this week, and they ride the wave and continue this win streak for the defending UFL champion defenders. So, we'll wrap up tonight with today's show. We're just, we're gonna next week we'll have more in-depth analysis, more on the defensive prospects. We'll talk about that. We'll also preview the DC Defenders home game versus Houston. We'll have the episode up probably about midweek or so, probably Thursday or Friday. We'll do that. We'll do the defensive prospects, and then from there, I'll give you my mock draft and then give you my full mock draft. I think the defenders should select all their picks coming into the 2026 season. So there'll be a perfect time for you to roast me and say, you don't know ball. You don't know nothing. But it is what it is. Definitely thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of Commanders in the Chat. And we'll be back in the chat next week. We'll catch you later on. And once again, happy Easter. And we'll catch you guys on our next